Welcome back to Following Noah on a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 203, and we are in chapters 10 through 16 of the Bands of Mourning. Paul, how are you?
Wonderful. Excited to talk about this with y'all once again. Yeah, other than that, nothing new. Oh, actually, got a new rug in our office. As you can see, there's nothing exciting that I have in the background, but there is stuff coming soon. So I know it's been boring for the people who actually watch on YouTube. But my background is particularly lame, but house is coming together, and I have a beautiful rug, which I can't show you, but I do have it. So
I am moving my house tomorrow, and I promise to have my full setup before we next record. So that's my one up on you. Eliot, how are you?
Yeah.
I'm doing pretty good. I'm pretty exhausted from a whole day of yard work, so I'm excited to just relax and talk about some Cosmere for a while.
And help you move tomorrow.
And then show up at your house tomorrow to help you move.
Yes. Okay, so chapters 10 through 16, we're in the Bands of Mourning. I have to level my head because I'm currently reading the Bands of Mourning, obviously. I'm halfway through the Lost Metal to map out our next chapter splits for next book. I am in Tress of the Emerald Sea. I'm also reading Oathbringer in my Stormlight refresher for myself. So I have to keep my head straight as let's roll intro, and then we will talk about the Bands of Mourning, chapters 10 through 16. Alrighty, Eliot, can you give us a brief summary of what happens in these chapters?
I will go for it. Chapters 10 through 16 for this round, which I think closes out a part, does it not?
Part 2, I believe.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Chapter 10, our party of heroes gets the lay of the land in New Saran? New Saran?
Yeah.
I immediately want to follow that up with the word rap. Saran wrap. It's like Saran, New Saran wrap. Anyway, my brain did that every time. It's a pretty cool city. It's got waterfalls everywhere, like through houses, and there's rivers running through, and there's gondolas that are like the main travel method throughout the city. They don't have trolleys or taxis. They have gondolas, which is pretty awesome. They get through the city, get to the hotel that they're staying at, thoroughly creep out the hotel keeper lady who is just trying to get them settled. They are invited to a party of one of the local noble women. They go to the party, and on the way in the door, Wax bumps into a beggar who just so happens to be the one and only Hoyd, which I was very excited to see.
No.
And then they bounce around the party for a little while. Wayne and Marcy head off to a graveyard to do a little bit of grave digging because, you know, when in New Saran, that's what you do, I guess. At the party, Wax bumps into a very mysterious lady who gives me a lot of information. I don't know that Wax picked up a lot of information, but I certainly did. I was very excited about it. Wax and Steris together are trying to investigate the lady at the party. Her name is Kelisina, I want to say.
Yep, Kelisina.
And they think she's involved with the set, which they prove to be correct. And Wax catches her mid-conversation with his Uncle Edwarn. But Uncle Edwarn has other plans and manages to frame Wax for Lady Kelisina's death. Right there. So not so great there, but Wax and Steris do escape. Meanwhile, in the graveyard, Marcy and Wayne are under attack from bad guys of some kind who are shooting bullets and lobbing dynamite, but they escape as well. Amongst them all, they're able to pick up enough information to kind of piece all together where they need to go. I forget the name of the city, but they do get a city name to head towards, which is where they know the set is got some operations going on. So end of the section, they are kind of headed out that way to go investigate what the set is up to.
Yeah, I can find that city name here in a second, but
Starts with like a D. I think it starts with a D.
Yeah,
D
I'll
something.
find it here in a second. Did you guys catch that Lady Killicina, the root name would be Kelsier? Like Killicina, it would be like the female version of Kelsier. She's named after Kelsier. I thought that was interesting. Okay.
I did not realize that. Cool.
It helps a lot if you see it spelled on the page. It's a little bit more obvious. Okay, so we arrive in New Saren. And before we get to the party, we get two main scenes. The first scene is when they're arriving on the train. They see all the cool waterfalls. They see some like logo of one of Wax's previous Nemeses back in the roughs. And Wax specifically thinks to himself, how on earth is this guy here? Is this just something to throw me off the trail of the set? So I'm deliberately not going to go after this guy and continue pursuing the set. So we get that scene, and then the very next chapter is when, or actually I think it's the end of the same chapter, we get our heroes showing up to rent out the penthouse of Aunt Jin's hotel, and we get maybe the best banter scene of Mistborn Era 2 so far. It's very good. What did you guys think of it?
This is easily the most chaotic scene that I think I've ever been a part of, like within a Sanderson book. It was truly like Brendan pulled out all the stops, and every character's quirks, like whatever their kind of like seemingly negative quirks would be to the average person, are all put on massive display right in front of this, I don't remember the name, but some poor lady here. And it was just absolute mayhem.
My favorite part is as Milan is walking in and out of the room, like ranting about her skull's getting cracked or whatever. Aunt Jin pulls Marcy aside and she's like, "You need to get away from these people. You need to get out. These people are not safe." Marcy's like, "It's fine. They're just a little quirky." Yeah, I really enjoyed this scene. I read it a couple times.
I think Steris is fast becoming a favorite character for me, as she's in the middle of all this. Don't worry, it's fine. I prepared you a list of all the things that could possibly happen and the things that you need to do. Here you go.
And that's supposed to calm her down. There's a list of everything that could possibly happen, and Steris is like, it offering it as like a soothing thing, but Aunt Jin's kind of freaking out. Yeah.
Stampede of cattle right through the middle of your hotel. It'll be okay. Just follow the instructions. Whole place catches on fire, burned down. Not a problem. Just keep track of this list and follow the instructions. It was really good.
What was I going to say? Oh, Wayne in this scene, he tries to trade Aunt Jin's peanuts back to her because he stole her peanuts, and then tries to trade them back as like a bargaining chip for, I don't know, her hat or something. I don't remember what it is, but there's Anyway, anything else in that scene you guys want to bring forward before we move on? There's quite a bit that happens in New Saren, but that's just a nice comedy piece to set it up. Okay, so before we even get to the party chapter starts. There's a long line of carriages waiting to get into the party. We've seen this scene before. Wax has no patience for it, gets out and starts walking. And then, Eliot, you mentioned it. Hoyd steps out of the shadows and has some choice words and a token for Wax. What is going on?
Hoyd is way more in the shadows in Mistborn than he is in like Stormlight Archive. Like he's a by the time you get to end of Stormlight, main character status in the book, or primary character. But here he just like pops out of the shadows, screams some random thing, and throws a coin at Wax, and then disappears. And you're kind of left with, okay. I mean, I'm not too surprised as a reader because I know that Hoyd likes to pop in at the right moments and drop just like a little bit of information to the heroes to nudge them along, which turns out to be exactly what it is, right? Wax notices that the coin is unique and has some like lettering on it that they don't understand, I think, something like that. But it's another one of those fairly humorous scenes of just random beggar guy jumping in, screaming random words and running away.
Yeah. Paul, did you catch what was on the coin? Do you remember?
I remember learning this, but honestly, I don't know. Full transparency, I feel like I remember this being a thing that and I probably should have written it down because I don't remember at all. And that's simply probably just because I read this like right at the start last time we did an episode, and in that time I've forgotten.
Sure. There are 3 distinct things about this coin that Wax notices. 1, it has the same markings / symbols as some of the pictures we got in our investiture slideshow. That the Contra, like the crazy Contra, took pictures of maybe where the bands of mourning are, and then can't remember anything. So there's some similar symbols. On the back of the coin, there's a picture of a man with one eye spiked through. And the third thing is it is made of 2 distinct metals. There's an inner circle of metal, and then there's an outer ring of a different metal. Gather anything from any of those 3?
Certainly the spike in the eye being, okay. I assume, Kelsier.
Okay.
Almost said spook, but I'm assuming Kelsier. And the 2 metals. Is this our first like implication of? It doesn't say anything about atium, does it? It's not. It's not that.
I mean, it could be, but it doesn't. It doesn't indicate anything.
Okay. I don't know why I had that thought in my head, but
also, if it helps you at all, Wax can sense it with allomancy. So okay. he doesn't seem to think it's like
some
a copper mind or anything like
bizarre
that.
Thing. Okay.
Because that is sensed differently with allomancy, and he can always sense that.
I see. Okay.
But if we've learned anything in Mistborn by now, it's that types of metals matter.
Right.
And so I think I took away from that simply there's 2 different metals which could easily serve a very specific purpose if you wanted it to.
Or could I don't know if it's this detailed, but he senses the coin being tossed at him from Hoyd as one line of allomantic metal, but it's specifically made of 2 different metals. So I wonder, I don't know if I should read into that closely, but I wonder if he can sense one of the metals and not sense the other. But because if it's made of 2 distinct ones, maybe he would notice that. I don't know.
I do think
that would be pretty tough to get 2 like distinct lines off of something that small, at least in my mind. Sure. But Wax is a pretty impressive allomancer, so maybe he could.
Were you gonna say something, Paul?
I was gonna say, so Wax is, like we've learned about the allomantic powers, not all of the allomantic abilities mean like you detect that metal, right? That's kind of like a coin shot or the pushers or polar thing, right?
Yeah, it's specifically like a coin shot or alert thing.
Even if you could burn the other one, I don't think it necessarily means you'd like detect it or whatever. I think so. Don't mean to foil your fun, but
you can foil my fun. That's okay.
Yeah, you've done it to me many times, so I guess it's
true. It's true. And in fact, this is a complete random tangent, but somebody said in one of our comments, I think it was on comment or on episode like 190 or maybe 200, that Paul or Eliot, you guys have the opportunity to read Stormlight 5 ahead of me and then lead the podcast and flip the podcast on its head if you wanted to. You could be the one to read ahead and I could be blind, see how it feels, but I don't know. It's up to you if you want to entertain that. Anyway, get into the party. There's some random nobleman who like kind of spurns Wax on his attempt to like have a conversation with him, and then his date mentions that he's into archaeology. That's kind of just I didn't necessarily get too much from that conversation.
Is that the one that full on insults him? Like goes pretty aggressive?
Well, he insults Wax first, and Wax doesn't respond. He's pretty controlled, and then he turns to Steris and insults Steris because he knows that'll get a reaction from Wax, and that's how he gets out of the conversation. So, yeah, I think the point of that conversation is just to highlight the tension between Elendel and like the outer cities, and how Wax really isn't welcome to this type of thing. But then in the scene directly after that, when Wax tries to go dancing with some older lady who he has some trade contracts with, his hand is stolen by someone who starts asking some very interesting questions. So, Eliot, I'm sure you want to talk about this at least a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a lot, actually.
Yeah, so we'll talk about who this is last. Like, who you think this might be last. What do they talk about?
Yeah, I was kind of dozing off a little bit in the previous chapters, and then as soon as this person shows up on the scene, my eyes snapped open and I was keying in, because she starts asking, she jumps in, she interrupts the dance, she steals Wax, and then starts grilling him on all of these allomancy and feruchemy questions, and wants to get his inside information about how his steel pushing changes when he changes his mass while he's in midair. You know, all these very specific questions, which I loved because they're all the same questions I've been asking. And
do you remember what I've been telling you? If Wax is like changing his changing his mass or his weight, and I've said he gets asked that question directly. So hold on.
Yep.
Here we go.
Yep. Here it is. And we get the answer to the question that I too is asking, which is when Wax does is it skimming? Is that what they call it? I think that's what they call it.
Yeah, skimmer. Yeah.
When he's decreasing his mass so that he can like specifically shotgun rocket himself through the sky. And I crunched a bunch of numbers and calculated some equations to try and calculate like how far he was flying through the sky, a while back. The important question I didn't have at the time, and I had to make an assumption about, was, is he actually physically reducing his mass, or is he reducing the pull of gravity on him? Well, we get the answer. It's mass. It's not gravity. It is actually his physical mass that is being reduced, which helps my science engineering brain a lot. They even talk about the conservation of momentum, which I was very tempted to break out more equations on you guys, because we could go calculate some conservation of momentum, but I'll spare you that one. Conservation of momentum is pretty simple in that mass and velocity are kind of tied together. If you have a mass and you're traveling at a velocity and you reduce your mass, then you're going to travel faster, or the other way. If you get heavier, you go slower. So the answer that I got, I thought back to my rocket equation that we did, and it doesn't change anything about what I calculated before. So everything I calculated before is still correct, which isn't really too much of a big revelation, other than it means the numbers that I was pointing to are correct, which all that really tells us is when Wax does that, shoots a shotgun so they can push him through the sky, he has to reduce his mass really, really, really low, like down to less than 5% of what his normal mass is. So it's not like the physics are broken. Far from it. I think all the math checks out. It just only checks out if Wax is very seriously reducing his mass. It's not just like half. It's like 95% gone.
There was another mechanic that I was thinking of when I was reading this. Wouldn't Wax be way more efficient? I mean, hypothetically, Wax would be doing this anyway, just not really thinking about it. If Wax, let's say he kept his mass at 1.0, like his normal mass, and he pushed off something and then reduced his mass, would the push be then way more effective because he's accelerated at a normal mass and then reduced a bunch of mass, so that now he's going a lot faster? Is that true?
Yes, correct. Your logic there is correct. The only
So while he's anchoring to something and pushing, he could be normal mass and then instantly like reduce a bunch and then go flying.
Yep, that would work. The only downside of that is he has to push a lot harder in the beginning. He'll be more mass, so he'll have to push harder to get going. But then, once he does, then drop the mass and he'll go flying.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna leave the experts say and final say to Eliot, but in my head, I'm like, wouldn't it still just be better to just decrease your mass and then push? Because you're gonna have to exert a lot more pressure to take off with your full mass or whatever and then decrease it versus like you can still just send yourself flying with light mass for less effort or something.
Sure.
I'm like but shouldn't it all kind of balance out and be like about the same? Maybe it is like truly better to do it one way, but in my head I'm like ultimately you're gonna have to push X amount. It's really more about how light you can make yourself more than how hard you can push, I guess.
Yeah, I think the only really big difference in that equation would be whatever he's pushing off against. If he reduces before he pushes, it's going to receive a lot less pressure if he's lighter already. But if he's still heavy when he's pushing a lot harder against that thing and then reducing. So that's the only thing that would matter.
I have a sort of related question.
Okay.
So, Era 1, right? There's kind of I feel like we're not given a hard answer to the limits. Maybe we were, and I don't remember this. But we know that Vin in Era 1 was like one of the best Allomancers. Like she was effectively just about like an expert at each one. The incentive of the single Allomancers versus Mistborn, they really knew the ins and outs of their one ability very well because that was the one thing they would focus on, right? But all in all, my question is, how hard can you push? Like if he's still pushing, how hard can you push? Is there a limit? Because I assume a limit is maybe tied to the amount of investiture you get, right? The amount of metal you have. But I'm like, in my head, there's still a limit because I feel like in my head, which could be wrong, there was a whole different level of investiture and stuff with Vin. But in my head, Vin was able to like push and do the different elementic things a little bit better. It's about the same, but like a bit better. And so that's my question is, because it doesn't matter what your weight is, you just push super hard, right? But how hard can you push? That's my question.
So I actually do think this is answered directly in Era 1 because Vin specifically, I think this is maybe Well of Ascension, that as she's pushing, she also has to burn pewter or else her body will break. She's pushing that hard that her body will buckle under the pressure, so she has to also burn pewter to increase her strength. So assuming you're as strong as Vin, without pewter, you could probably tear yourself apart with a steel push. But with that said, I doubt Wax is that powerful. Like you said, Vin was all sorts of special. So steel pushing without pewter is probably dangerous if you're like really good at steel pushing. You could probably do some serious damage to your body.
That makes sense because it perfectly makes sense to me, and I think you are right. I feel like it was spelled out pretty blatantly at some point in Era 1. I just don't remember exactly when, but there's at least like external hindrances of like, what am I pushing off of? You know, I can't just send myself flying extremely hard into something like, you know, there's you can't just, it's a dangerous experiment, I guess, like to see how hard you could push or something. You probably end up getting yourself killed or break bones and stuff. So,
but going back to the reducing his mass thing, Wax is also a special case now that I think about it, because then if he reduced his mass and then pushed a bunch, the relative pressure on his body on the surface area of his body is going to be fairly low, because he's not actually putting that much pressure because his mass is low.
Because the size of his body stays the same, so I think you're right. If he was physically shrinking, then which would be way more fun in my opinion. Side note. If he got really little, so
right.
Then I feel like the strength would be equivalent, right? Like it would just be proportional. But
right.
Anyways, interesting.
The lady brings up another, arguably more interesting question, almost in parting.
Yeah,
she gets her answers.
Wax doesn't even acknowledge it because he doesn't even understand it.
Wax, the lady gets her answers, and so she's kind of like about to swirl away, and like as she's going away, she's like, "Oh, now I just have to figure out why there's no red shift with speed bubbles." Whoosh, and she's gone. And I was like, "Ooh, hold on a second. Why would she think that there should be red shift with speed bubbles?" So what
does she know that she could even consider that?
Yeah, so this is really intriguing, actually, the more you think about it. So redshift is a phenomenon that we observe in our world. It happens when you have when you're observing an object that is moving. I think redshift is away from you. It's when objects are moving away from you really, 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 really fast. If they're moving fast enough, it like distorts the wavelength of the light that's like bouncing off the thing, and it shifts the color that you perceive. So think of like your color scale in like the electromagnetic wavelengths. It starts at red. Red is like the short wavelengths, and goes red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, down to the longest wavelengths. So when it's moving away from you, it gets distorted towards red.
So wouldn't redshift then be moving towards you since it's making the wavelength shorter?
I'm pretty sure redshift is going away from you.
My question was going to be, what is redshift? Because I've never heard of this before.
So, like Eliot's saying, if something is moving fast enough, like near speed of light, away from you or towards you, it's going to look a different color than it actually is, because it's distorting the wave, the length of the wave of light that it actually is. It's moving fast enough to shorten the wave as it's coming closer to you or further away.
Wow, this is not what I thought we'd be talking about.
Yeah, it's definitely moving away from you. Looks red, but yeah, Trevor, I'm not sure why that makes the wavelength look shorter than it, or maybe I have that wrong, and wavelengths are longer in the red versus the purple.
No, you're right. Ultraviolet is a long.
That's what I thought.
I thought ultraviolet was the small ones, personally.
I'll have to go look that up after.
I know there's infrared and ultraviolet, but yeah, I don't remember which is which.
Right.
I know for sure that objects moving away from you, if it's moving fast enough, will look redder than it should. But the speed at which you have to move in order for redshift to be a thing, is crazy fast. Faster than any man-made object has ever gone by a lot. The only time that, well, I shouldn't say that because I don't know. The most common time that we observe redshift here in our world is like observing really, really far away stars and galaxies. Because once you get to the cosmic level, like things can reach ridiculous speeds relative to each other. So we know the universe is expanding because we can observe redshift in really far away stars. But back to Mistborn. Oh, nope. Before we go back to Mistborn, there's one more thing. There's a second way you can have redshift. Gravity. Gravity can mess up your perception of things and time and whatnot. So
like around a black hole.
Exactly. So like a black hole can cause redshifty type things because it's distorting kind of everything that's going around it. And so you can get like redshift type effects around very large sources of gravity. Now back to the Cosmere. How in the world could speed bubbles be having either one of those effects? Yes, when Wayne pops his bubble, he's moving really fast, right? He's a blur. He can have a whole conversation with Wax and then bring down the bubble and then the bullet flies past, you know, that kind of thing. Even that is nowhere near the speeds we're talking about for redshift. Nowhere near. And I don't think speed bubbles are black holes. Maybe they are, but I don't think they are, to where like gravity is causing redshift. So in my mind, redshift should have nothing to do with speed bubbles. But this person, who might know a lot more about the Cosmere than me, seems to think they should.
Trying to pull up the allomantic power for what Wayne is burning. Chromium? Is that what he's burning? No. Nigrosyl?
Bend alloy?
Bend alloy,
bend
that's
alloy.
what it is. Okay, so the allomantic power for bend alloy, according to Ars Arcanum, which is written by who? Do you guys know? Chris. Okay. According to Chris, bend alloy speeds up time.
Okay.
And cadmium slows down time. That's what Nemeses doing.
And so I think where this goes is we could be talking about like theory of relativity stuff here.
Right.
That's how like black hole gravity starts to distort things. You have to start getting into relativity physics, which is way, way, way over my head. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about that because that gets crazy fast. But like due to 3 words on a page, redshift with speed bubbles. Now I'm wondering, like, is this person doing research into relativistic physics within the Cosmere? Because that's where this leads me.
Okay.
You need to go back to school and get a PhD in physics before we finish the book.
Before you go into Stormlight Era 3? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
This was out of Shadows of Self, by the way. So you, in theory, you have seen this chart that I'm reading. Okay. Interesting. So I don't know enough about this to really theorize about this, but you know, when you're approaching, when you're moving really fast, you're approaching the speed of light, your time moves slower.
I think so.
So that's what Nemeses doing?
Maybe.
And then Wayne is doing the opposite. I don't know if I was ready for this today. Okay.
I'm not going to try and guess at the exact physics of what's going on here. All I'm taking away from this is somebody's doing some guessing about the very detailed physics of what's going on here. If you're doing research into redshift around these time manipulating magical powers, that's some deep stuff.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads you to the question of who the heck is this? And I'm I'm frustrated about this. I want Paul's thoughts on this first before you say anything, Trevor. Because I read this, I got all excited. I started Google researching all this physics. And then I finish all that. I'm going, okay, I got to know who this is. So I post in our Discord about my excitement of what I'm learning here. And the response I get from one of our Discord folks is, you should know who this is. So I immediately pick up my book and go, why don't I know who this is? And I've racked my brain for a good week and a half now. And I still don't know who this is. But apparently I'm supposed to know who this is. Paul, help me. Who is this?
Eliot, I can't believe you missed this. I'm just kidding. I don't know who this is yet. I don't think I do. I feel like a lot of the stuff is surprisingly going over my head if I'm supposed to know who this is.
What's her descriptors? As she starts the dance with Wax, how does Wax describe her? Do you guys remember?
I do want to say...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I remember if
okay.
you...
I was going to say, I don't think I haven't spent the week thinking about this. So if I hear the descriptors, like I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. So if I hear that, it may stick out to me now that I'm thinking through that lens. But I'm curious.
All that I noted was dark-skinned and braids.
Yep. Okay. Dark skin, braids. He thinks to himself, dark skin like the Terrace. Wait, no, that's not right. She's darker than most Terrace. And I have Terrace in me, and she's way darker than me. So does that tell you anything?
I do remember this now. I remember hearing this and thinking about it.
What is the parting gift that she gives Wax as she twirls away?
She gives him a gift?
She gives him a piece of paper. It's not nothing exciting. She twirls away and says, "Let me know what you find as you experiment." She gives him an address. No name on it, just an address.
Is it 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney, Australia? Sorry.
I was trying to think about the only name that came to mind was Chris. We actually mentioned her already, just because we know that she's doing research about the Cosmere everywhere. She pops up apparently in all of our planets or various planets. She wrote an entire Arcanum Unbounded for us to teach us about the different worlds that she's going to. So the motive seemed to match with Chris, but I couldn't recall what physical description of Chris we've gotten before. I know we just spent some time with Kelsier, who ran into her. So I should have probably gone back and reread that section from Mistborn's Secret History. Okay. I did not, to see if the description matched that.
I have one guess that I'm thinking of now, and this is truly like a guess, at best an educated guess. Is this anyone from Emperor's Soul? I'm honestly just trying to think of things that I don't really remember what the people looked like. That's where I'm at. And people who might be running around the Cosmere, you know.
To answer your Emperor's Soul question, most people... Oh my goodness. What's the kingdom that Shy's in? It's not Elantris. No, it's the other kingdom on the other side of the planet that they do trade with Elantris. I don't remember. That they're based on Korea and Eastern European. So by all fan art I've seen, that's how they look, is Korean or Eastern European. So that's probably not your answer. Sort of tied to this, Eliot, you put something else in the live reactions. Do you want to jump to that?
Yeah,
and then I'll circle back to who this might be.
And you'll finally tell us who this is that we're supposed to know already.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of Chris, I've been paying more attention to the broadsheets lately. Book one, I honestly didn't read every single word on them. Now I have been. because there's been a few bits and pieces buried in there. And I didn't have to dig very deep when I flipped the page over to the start of chapter 15 and saw, it's probably the second broadsheet. Yeah, I think in the book.
Upper right quadrant.
Yeah. Right smack in the middle of the page is this giant ad in the paper that says, I'll read it. Do your metal tools speak to you? Your neighbors probably don't want to hear about it, but we do. Visit 27 Raylan Place, ask for K or N, bring the talking metal with you. I read that and immediately went, what? Talking metal? Who? Wait, hold on. Why in the world does someone on Scadrial expect there to be talking metal? I also can take a rather good guess, I think, at who K and N might be, because we know Chris is doing research and traveling the Cosmere. Her name starts with K. She's got a little buddy who follows her around and like draws maps and things. We've seen his notes on various things. His name is Naz. Naz and Chris would match K and N. So now I'm wondering if Chris and Naz might be in Elendel asking about talking metal.
Is that broadsheet from Elendel?
Great question. See if I can deduce that. Let me flip back to the other one.
I think the answer is no.
Oh, no, it's from New Saren.
From New Saren.
Oh, there you go.
So somebody who is dancing with wax shows up in New Saren, gives him an address with no name. Go to this ad. There's an address with no name. This is Chris hanging out in New Saren doing research. Congratulations, Eliot. You got it.
Nice. So, let's talk about talking metal for a second.
Yeah.
Because that's what I got hung up on first. I can think of, let me back up. The Cosmere is crazy. There's a lot of wacky stuff in the Cosmere. We got magic systems coming out our ears. Scadrial is all based on metals. The metals do the stuff. But I don't think metal has talked to us so far in Scadrial.
Unless you're qualifying hearing voices when you're pierced by metal. That's the only thing that you could maybe equate, right?
Okay. I didn't think about that because we know the explanation for that, which is pierced by metal can connect you to certain people.
In the cognitive realm, correct.
Yeah, you might hear Kelsey or somebody from a different realm. I didn't think about that. I was taking this more literally. The only example I can think of in the Cosmere of metal that talks, we have seen metal that talks. Magic metal.
He's not from Scadrial, though.
And his name is Nightblood. But he's not from Scadrial. We've read his origin story, or, well, kind of his origin story. And he's from somewhere else. So why does Chris think there's talking metal on Scadrial?
Do you think there's more Nightbloods?
There's a couple ways this could go, right? Does Chris know about Nightblood and is like, ooh, I'll go to Scadrial and see if there's any talking swords on Scadrial?
See if she's maybe looking in the wrong place for another Nightblood. Yeah, maybe.
Or does she know something we don't?
I'm sure she does. The way I went with this on my first read, because this jumped out to me, especially on an audiobook. Michael Kramer has a field day with this one. He goes, "Do your metal tools speak to you? Hello. Your neighbors probably don't want to hear about it, but we do." He's really funny with it. Anyway, I'm super Stormlight brain centric. When I read this, I was thinking, okay, Spren are manifesting on Scadrial and Chris knows about it. That's where I went. I'm like, there's talking sticks.
My hammer Spren and
right. Yeah. Convince my hammer to be fire. That's where I went with this in my brain. That people are like accidentally talking to their tools as if it was a Spren on Roshar. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. There's going to be Spren on Scadrial. I don't think that's what this is, but that's where my brain first went when I read this for the first time. Actually, like right at the time we started this podcast. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. What is Chris digging for here? Is she digging for, you know, whatever Nightblood is? Is she digging for Spren? Is she digging for ties to the cognitive realm via hemalurgy? Like, what's going on?
I was definitely trying to figure out what this is, and my first impression, it was not the same as yours, Trevor. I did not think, wow, they're going to be Spren on Scadrial. But, I mean, almost kind of similar. I wrestled with this, and I really don't know what it means, but my takeaway is that the metal itself, we know that we've seen, I guess, kind of an elementic grade metal where you have to have the right amount of whatever alloy and stuff for it to be burnable, for it to be good. But we're assuming that the metal itself has investiture. And so I'm wondering if that investiture is just kind of developing, or if there's, I don't know, maybe there's a hammer out there that the metal used in it is like some kind of perfect grade of elementic metal or some new kind. I feel like this is honestly something that's like a neat nod that is going to come up in like Stormlight. Sorry, not Stormlight. Mistborn Era 3 or something is how I feel about this. I feel like somehow this is gonna become a relevant thing for the magic system and the investiture on Scadrial in the future. This is like the new thing, kind of like in Stormlight. You see like the, you know, surge binders aren't real, and it's like a big reveal when the first one happens, but then it, you know, might become more frequent. I wonder if this is what's going on here. It's just all like a hearsay wives' tale right now, but maybe it'll be more prevalent.
I want to bring up one more thing before we move off of Chris. I think we've realized this before, but it's another moment to bring it back up. World hoppers in general don't seem to age.
Yeah,
because we've met Chris. We've met Chris before in Secret History.
Right.
That was 300 years ago.
Right. And she looks the exact same, it looks like.
As far as we know, right? Or at least not that aged.
Right.
Not 300 years old, for sure. But we also know that she's like been to Roshar and other places too.
And Vasher doesn't seem to be like a super old guy. Like he's a rugged older soldier, but he's not like, you know, decrepit or whatever. And then our fused don't seem to age as they come back each desolation. So yeah.
There's something we haven't read about yet, having to do with how are all these people showing up at different points in the timeline and appearing to not age. Because Brandon has told us, correct me if I'm wrong here, no time travel.
Correct.
So
to the past.
Okay.
So
okay.
Time manipulating to the future we see in this book. We just talked about it, right? Like you're manipulating time as time moves forward.
Right.
We're seeing, but there's no time travel to the past.
Right. So somehow people are not aging.
Yep. All this off of, she mentions Scadrial as if she's not from Scadrial, and so many questions.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is that it for Chris, who has made a cameo appearance in the Bands of Mourning? Back to the main plot of this party. Wax follows Lady Calicina to one of her back rooms, kind of like tracks her through her palace, and she appears to be on a phone call with Edward, What's that about?
Well, it's no surprise by now that Suit is pulling the strings.
Right.
So we've found one of the cronies of Suit. So not too surprising in that the characters are interacting. Kind of cool that we're discovering new technology that apparently is the set has, but is not widespread among society, which is another interesting point, that they have telephones or radios. Almost seem more like a walkie-talkie or a radio style communicator.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting how Brandon Sanderson is introducing more technology in this book. He kind of just drops it. Like, oh yeah, these people have had it for a couple of years and just haven't told anybody. Like, that would have been good information to know.
When Wax was outside the door and about to go in, I was ready to predict that it was going to be a Sion. That was
It kind of seems like a Sion. Like, even after it's described, it's like a little box on the table, but it doesn't say like it's morphing or anything. I think it's just straight up a radio, and that's what it's
I think so too.
Yeah,
that was my impression too. But I was ready for him to bust in and there be like a floating, orb of Edwarn's head, and it'd be a Sion, but it wasn't.
Right. Yeah.
I agree with you on that, and I especially thought it might be a Sion because I didn't think this immediately as I read the story through. It was all normal. I didn't jump to any conclusions, but thinking about it later, it is true that like in my head, if this is like an early radio thing, a walkie-talkie type scenario, I feel like you would be able to tell that Set is not in the room if you're Wax, right? Like, I feel like the early radio communication stuff like that would be fuzzy and grainy and stuff, and you wouldn't. But I'm like, a Sion would make more sense of like being really clear. But I think that's something that I'm just reading too much into. I don't actually think that's a serious argument.
Sure.
I think that's kind of a funny thing to be, if I'm being nitpicky about it.
And Wax recognizes the voice before he goes in as Edwarn, and he would have no concept of how he would be hearing him without him being in the room, right? So he's not going to assume that he's not in the room if he can hear him. So what else? Kelisina gets shot by her servants, who are apparently working for Edwarn. Wax gets framed for it. The term Civil War is thrown around at least twice in these chapters. Like, it's been established that there's tension between Luthadel, Elendel, and like the surrounding basin. But like, there's an informant guy at the party, and he's like, I wonder how bad the first Civil War will be in the basin, and then walks away. And Wax is like, what? Wait. I mean, I know stuff is getting contentious, but no way is Civil War's on the table, right? Do you guys think a Civil War's on the table?
Well, we thought we might have stopped one at the end of last book.
Right.
We had an uprising in Elendel that we think we quelled. But part of this book has definitely been feeding us that there's a lot more unrest than we thought, and a lot more unrest than our characters thought. Our characters in Elendel have apparently had blinders on and don't realize that all the cities outside of Elendel are really grumpy about the fact that Elendel is taxing them heavily and controlling all the trade and won't let them build railways to each other. They have to come through Elendel, all these kinds of things that are pointing to the fact that maybe the rule of Elendel is not quite as benevolent as the Elendelians think it is. Elendellers? Elendellers?
Elendellers. That sounds good.
Elendellers, I like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
The Elendelians.
Elendelnonians. As they're escaping the party at the end of part 2 here, Wax thinks to himself, hopefully I didn't just start a civil war, because he was obviously framed for it. And Edwarn drops the line of an army like being prepped for New Saren, which is like on a level that Wax was definitely not expecting. So we are off to chase Edwarn to. Oh, I never looked up that other city name. Hold on. Someone else talk about something while I find it.
Let me. You mentioned Wax being framed for the murder of Lady Kelisina, which I absolutely do worry about that starting civil war because Ellen Deller, who nobody likes, comes to the outer city, murders one of the well-known noble ladies, and then runs off. That's definitely going to cause some unrest. So head that way. Kelisina herself, though, I noticed something about her. I noticed that Wax describes her, notices that she has rings on each finger, which could easily be nothing. But Trevor, you mentioned being Roshar-brained. I too tend to think back to our Roshar days quite a bit. And there's a character in that book, in those books, that is always described that way whenever we see her. And it's she has a crazy name.
Exindweth.
That one. And to the point where it stood out enough to me here to not necessarily jump to the fact that maybe those could be the same characters. I don't think that's happening here, but rings on the finger, could this just simply be metal mines or something else? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just meant to say that she's a ferochemist.
Okay. That was kind of where I got to, but my brain put the red thread in between those two people.
Garmet. Is that the other city?
Met?
With
Does
G?
not sound familiar.
That's what's northeast of New Saren on the map, but that's all I can find.
Dolsing or something like that?
Oh, you're right. That's exactly what it is. Dolsing.
Is it?
That's, yeah. That definitely rings a bell.
Oh, yeah. Here it is. Starts with a D. Dolsing. Yep. Dolsing.
Okay. We are off to Dolsing to catch Edwarn. Anything else for this episode, gentlemen?
Two quick things. I know we're running long. Two honorable mentions of scenes here that I thought were pretty cool.
Okay.
First up, we hardly talked about Wayne and Mercy at all.
Well, because they didn't find anything. They were taking for the spike and didn't find it.
They found one clue. I remember it being important that each party found one clue, and the clues together gave them where they needed to go. I forget exactly what they found, but yeah, Mercy and Wayne were mainly just fighting off bad guys in a graveyard. But the scene where Wayne gets the information out of the dude, he dresses up as Death, and has this elaborate impersonation scene where he scares the crap out of the dude, thinking that Death has come, and gets the information that he needs, which I thought was just pretty hilarious.
That was really funny. I have to add to that briefly, because that scene, while it was unfolding and I was listening to the audiobook and Michael Kramer is doing such a good job, I was like, oh my gosh, is this Trell? Is this Ruin? Is this like how, who, what's happening? And then you flip the audiobook page and it's just Wayne, and I was like, oh yeah, give me a heart attack. It's like, what's going on?
It also swaps point of view without giving you any warning. You're within the point of view of Templeton Fig, who has never been mentioned. You have no idea what's going on. And there's this dead body that comes flying through the door, and then Death's like, your time has come, I will kill you. And you're like, what is going on?
Yeah. It was some serious interlude action.
Yeah.
So I loved it. It was awesome. I also want to add to I am certainly on board the it seems like it's starting to set up. Eliot briefly mentioned that Wayne and Steris together. I feel like it's starting to set them up as maybe a potential romance thing, which would kind of play our fields out. Maybe I'm digging into it.
You said Steris, but surely you meant Mercy.
Yes, I meant Mercy.
Okay.
My apologies. Yes. I meant Wayne and Meracy.
Yeah,
My bad.
yeah,
Right.
It's kind of starting to set them up a little bit, I think, and so we'll kind of even out. I didn't know how long our little like potential love triangle of Wax and these ladies would go on, but I feel like we're starting to go away from that direction.
Yeah. The Wayne and Maracy thing has like been hinted at, but Wayne insists that he's not interested. Like Maracy will kind of mention like something like between them, but Wayne insists that he's absolutely not interested in Maracy. So for what that's
and
worth.
sneaks into corners to make out with Milan every once in a while.
That's what I was thinking.
That is true.
And at least a little casual interest in Milan. So
While you mentioned love triangle, that ties into my other scene that I think we have to mention here, which I thought was a really, really beautiful scene, actually, where Wax and Steris fly. I think this is when they're escaping from the party that we've been talking about. Wax flies up using his cool allomancy powers and goes all the way up above the mists. And there's this cool scene where they rise together up through the mists into like the starlit open air field above the clouds and the mist. And really cool visual. I could imagine this really clearly. He talks about it. He referenced it as the Ascendance Field, which I thought was super cool because Vin always loved this, right? She loved the stars. She loved the mist and calling like the tops of the clouds this space that is the Ascendance Field is pretty cool. And then at the end of it all, Wax and Steris share an actually quite lovely little kiss between the two of them, which felt like, the romance between the two of them, which was maybe only budding, seems to have now like blossomed into, okay, we're full in on Wax and Steris, or at least the two of them are at this point.
Yeah. There is a incredible Mistborn Era 2 art piece from Gar Leva, which I will link for you.
I'm really excited to hear you say this because I love this scene.
This is my favorite Mistborn Era 2 art, and there are not too many to choose from, but man, does Gar Leva do a great job. I will put it on screen for anyone who would like to see it, but there you go.
Yeah, that's impressive.
That is awesome. I love that.
Yeah, the visuals of pushing above the mists and then Wax finally admitting that he does have like genuine feelings for Steris, and yeah, great scene. I agree.
That was it. That was all. We had to mention those two scenes super fast because they were definitely worthy of note. But I think that's all I had from these chapters.
All right, let's do a quick Stormlight review to end the episode.
Oh, I was not mentally prepared for this. Let's do it.
Switch hats, gentlemen. It is still 10-6. Eliot, you're going to lead this. I'm going to give you a chapter name of a Stormlight chapter. You need to give me a brief summary of what happened in the chapter. Your chapter name is The Spear That Would Not Break.
This is one of those highly metaphorical chapter names that you feel like you should know exactly what it's talking about. Well, spear. Kaladin's the spearman. He does all the spear stuff. So obviously Kaladin is doing some things. What is he doing? This feels like Rhythm of War, where Kaladin is facing a lot of challenges, and maybe he's like dealing with the depression and going to like the depression group, that's a terrible way to say that.
The therapy group that he started.
Thank you. That's a way better way to refer to that. In Rhythm of War, where he's like, getting some help and reconnecting with his father more, and maybe kind of feeling a resurgence of the wretch that is a big theme in like Way of Kings, but resist that and does not break. There you go.
Incorrect.
Yeah.
Good guess though. Yeah. Paul?
Okay. This is one of the best I've felt about my guesses so far, but who knows, it'll probably still be wrong. I think this is the chapter where we're learning about Talonel being the spear that wouldn't break, as in like upholding the oath pact. Like whenever we're learning that, he was left behind and all the stuff. I'm blanking a bit on the actual chronology in our storyline of when this happens, but I'm pretty sure that's like the scene is where we, the reader, and maybe not us, the reader, but our characters are learning that Tom did not break.
Incorrect.
Okay.
Paul, you're closer chronologically. Eliot, you're closer thematically. This is certainly about Kaladin. This is the end of the Battle of Thalen Fields, when Kaladin and Amaram are fighting, and Rock actually kills Amaram with a bow. But Kaladin goes on this little rant about how all of the stuff that Kaladin's been through has proven that he is the spear that would not break, and et cetera, et cetera. That's the 2-hour long chapter at the end of Oathbringer. We did an entire episode on just this chapter. At the this is right after Dalinar accepts the pain, and then the battle breaks out, and this is that really long chapter of Kaladin versus Amaram, and Lift and Zeth are running around doing all sorts of stuff, and there's the thrill and all that.
That was quite a chapter. Yeah.
All right, Paul, your quote ID. Who's speaking? You don't have to persuade me. But again, think of a nation that your ancestors offended, but whose resources you now need. Wouldn't you at least send an envoy with an official apology?
You know me, Trevor. I'm going to need to hear it twice.
Naturally. You don't have to persuade me. But again, think of a nation that your ancestors offended, but whose resources you now need. Wouldn't you at least send an envoy with an official apology?
I think that this is Shallan. I'm not going to elaborate any further.
Incorrect. All right, Eliot, who is speaking?
I know who this is. But I cannot think of the name, and it's killing me. And this is going to give Paul the other answer of it too, but I'm going to go for it. This is the Erdazian general that comes to help Dalinar, who has a funky name. It's like a mob boss kind of name. And I can't remember. It's like the Rat or something like that. Or the... what is it? I've been trying to think of it for the last minute, and it's not coming. The only thing I can think of is like the Rat.
It is the Mink.
The Mink.
And if that were the correct answer, I would have given it to you. But that is incorrect.
Oh, come on.
If that was the person, if that was the right person, I would have... I agree, Trevor. I was like, that's his point. He's got it. If you remember that.
Here's the response. Soldier, you're saying they want us to go to them begging? If Odium claims this land, they'll suffer as much as we will.
Okay. Trevor, can I have you read like the whole thing, like the first and second back?
Sure. You're now trying to tell me who is talking the second time, but here's the first one. You don't have to persuade me. But again, think of a nation that your ancestors offended, but whose resources you now need. Wouldn't you at least send an envoy with an official apology? Here's the response. Soldier, you're saying they want us to go to them begging? If Odium claims this land, they'll suffer as much as we will.
Okay, so now I need to know who's saying this second half of the quote, right?
Correct. Who's being spoken to in the first half and who's saying the second line.
I may be totally off, but I think that this is to, and then now speaking is Teravangian.
Incorrect.
Okay. I thought this might have been Malata and Teravangian. Was actually where I was going. It's a lot of conversations still happening.
Yeah.
In the Stormlight Archive, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations.
All right, Eliot.
I think we might be talking about Parshendi now. In which case, but I'm not sure which party is having this conversation. Is this Alethi talking about Parshendi? Is this Parshendi talking about Alethi? This is I don't really know, so I'm just gonna guess. I'm thinking this is actually Parshendi maybe talking about Alethi. So I'm gonna go. Yeah, this doesn't really make sense timeline wise. I'm out of ideas. It's Eshonai.
Incorrect. The party being spoken about is the Honor Spren.
Yeah.
And this is Sigzil talking to Dalinar. Dalinar is asking Sigzil, who is at this point the leader of the Windrunners, how do we approach the Honor Spren? And Sigzil says, you have to go send an envoy as an apology, which is what feeds into our Shallan and Adolin timeline in Rhythm of War.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is true. There were a lot of conversations.
Yep.
Would have taken me a while to arrive there.
All right, Eliot. Here's your review. Tell me what is being spoken about and what they rated it. Okay. Got to get in character.
Oh, boy.
On the whole, my life is pretty uneventful. I do normal human things with other normal humans, feeling normal human emotions. But sometimes, rarely, a book swoops in and uproots my life with a ship for which I would actually die. My poor fangirl heart bleeds for that ship. You may catch me curled up in my bed for days in the fetal position, obsessively rereading the best scenes. That ship, my lovelies, is Kaladin and Shallan. Oh man, oh gosh, oh dear, oh boy, oh boy. Reading this felt like Branderson stuck his hand right through my ribs, grabbed my heart, and said, I'm calling all the shots now. I can say with certainty that my emotional stability is at his whim from now on. The angst, the drama, the beautiful banter is everything. There you go.
Wow. That Teenage Girl has written that one.
There you go. Yep.
Fresh out of English poetry class. Whew. Okay. Am I going first on this?
Yes, you're going first.
Okay. Sorry, that was a bit of a roller coaster there. I'm coming back to it. Okay. I'm guessing a book, and I'm guessing what they rated it.
Yes.
This better darn be a 5, or I'm gonna have questions. This is 5. Kaladin Shallan. Okay. Then this is kind of tricky, actually, because I feel like they don't even meet in Way of Kings. So are they really in love with them like separately so much that Way of Kings is creating all this hearts aflutter? I feel like this person would really enjoy like love triangles that start to appear. Not Adolin. She loves Kaladin and Shallan. Okay. Words of Radiance. 5 stars. Final answer.
All right, Paul.
Trevor, can you read it again?
Absolutely not. That was a 1 out of 1 performance. You're not getting that one again.
Oh,
you can rewind the video.
My plan was to have you read it again and just say, like, thanks. I didn't actually need it. I just wanted to hear you.
I know. I'm calling your bluff.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm proud of that one performance. You're not getting it again.
I made up my mind. I thought I knew the answer to this before Eliot said anything. So I'm not gamesman shipping him here. but I firmly believe that this is also a 5 out of 5 for Words of Radiance.
You are both correct. It is a 5 out of 5 for Words of Radiance. At least she makes sense through her heart-throbbing review.
I also want to add, I would predict Eliot made a brief comment of like, you know, it's probably a teenage girl with the like, you know, the emotions and the drama, the poetry of this review. But I bet she's our age. I bet she's could be the late 20s or in her early 30s or so. I fully believe that.
She has 465 reviews on Goodreads. So however you want to read into that.
Wow. And I shouldn't make fun because as a heartfelt, like, you go for it. If it is easy to love these characters, I could write an equally gushy review on Goodreads if I felt like it.
All right. That puts us 2-2. Going into the trivia question, which goes to Paul. I think, goes to Paul. You ready? At the beginning of Oathbringer, Shallan requests that her radiant order be kept secret from the public so as to conceal her powers. What order do they claim her to be instead of a Lightweaver?
What order do they claim her to be instead of a Lightweaver? They as in like the public, or? So,
yes, Dalinar, Shallan, Renarin, and Kaladin are 4 Knights Radiant moving into Oathbringer, and they publish to the public what order they are to everybody else. But Shallan requests that hers is altered so as to keep her powers secret. What do they claim that she is? What does Dalinar claim that she is when he releases the whatever?
I think, okay, to the best of my memory, I believe she claims to be a Truth Watcher.
Incorrect. Eliot?
I thought about that too, but isn't it the Truth Watcher that shares the illumination ability with the Lightweaver? I
it might
can't remember
be.
If that's true or not. I think it is, and I think that's what she's trying to hide. She's trying to hide that she can do the illumination thing because that's where she puts on her disguises and goes as people. That's what she's trying to still be able to do. If everyone knew she could do that, then she'd lose that power. So I think it's the other way. I think they've gone for the order that shares her soul casting, which I think is Elsecaller because it's Yasna's, because she can do the soul casting thing too. So my brain says like remembers Truth Watcher, but my logic says Elsecaller.
You are absolutely correct. Your logic is 100% on track. She's trying to conceal her light weaving abilities, so she claims she's an Elsecaller, which is why she can soulcast. Nice job. So the point goes to Eliot this week.
Yeah.
Alrighty. We can close it there. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot. We will reconvene with more Bands of Mourning next week.
See you next time.
Peace out.